Okay, I'm supposed to moderate this. Met Steve 5 minutes ago. Stewart, I've never met.
Nice to meet you all.
So I think the best thing to do is simply to let you guys introduce the work that you do and to talk about it, and then we'll see what that generates. I don't know, Stewart, do you want to start?
Yeah, of course. We're going to get on to sort of the meat of what we're talking about today, all kinds of limbo in a minute, but I just thought it might be useful before that for me to sort of tell you a little bit about the Immersive Storytelling Studio and what the journey's been for that building, for that part of the National Theatre over the last 5 years. And I'll caveat by saying I've only been at the National Theatre for 2 of those last 5 years, but I will be looking back in time a little bit at those earlier projects. So the Immersive Storytelling Studio is, I guess, maybe one of the more mysterious parts of the National Theatre, and also one of the newest departments. It was formed in 2016 when Rufus Norris, the artistic director here, decided to formalise the relationship between what was then sort of the digital department and the National Theatre itself. Now, when Rufus did one of his earliest shows at the National, Wonder.Land, which was a collaboration with Moira Buffini and Damon Albarn, Toby Coffey, who was then running the digital side of things, was brought in to create a kind of virtual reality, I guess, B-side to the show, or a virtual reality piece of added content to the Wonder.Land show, and created a sort of 4-minute music video in VR, developed on a sort of Unity platform, which was a sort of song from the musical Wonder.Land brought to life in a VR way. And Rufus saw this. It was a great success. It had a run in the foyer areas of the National, and then it went on to play at various film and VR festivals across the world, and was seen by a huge number of people, far more than ever got to see Wonder.Land itself. Rufus stepped in and said, look, there's something really exciting going on here. There's something in the area of virtual reality, mixed reality, that we should be doing as a storytelling theatre. And the way Toby tells it, anyway, Rufus had just read Creativity Inc., the Pixar story of Pixar, which talks very much about how the real magic happens not when technology gets to a certain point, but when that technology meets storytellers, and that's the kind of most exciting moment, and that's kind of what Pixar's founding principle was. And Rufus had a vision of a section within the National Theatre where we could kind of push into the most cutting-edge technologies in the worlds of mixed reality and virtual reality and immersive interactive theatre, but also bring them together with the kind of highest standards of storytelling that the National Theatre embodies. So since 2016, the Immersive Storytelling Studio has been doing that. We've kind of created a number of projects, some of which such as Home Amir, which was a project made from taking 360-degree cameras into the Calais jungle and creating a kind of documentary piece of theatre, which was then put to a kind of prose poem, and to create a kind of immersive documentary of one refugee's journey from the Calais jungle to the UK. That was kind of a 360 film, which again toured film festivals. We then moved on to look at how we might start bringing more of a live element into that, and that had its first really involved outing in Draw Me Close, which had its first version last spring at the Young Vic Theatre, which was an experiment in combining a 360 experience in a headset with a live performer to create a sort of unique one-on-one experience written by writer Jordan Tannehill, which allowed one audience member at a time to experience a piece of storytelling that both had the kind of the imaginative power or the kind of the visual potential of VR combined with the tactile experience of being in a live one-on-one performance. And that's a piece which is, I think, having its North American premiere later this year. And we're now kind of starting to, in the last 12 months, look into what the next step is in the future. And we're at the early stages of commissioning our first ever full-length hybrid piece of VR theatre, which we are hoping we will find space for in one of the actual 3 theatres at the National Theatre to really start seeing how we can bring live performance and VR technology together into a full-length theatre performance. So my role there is as dramaturg. I work as a dramaturg in the new work department, developing sort of across the slate of new projects that the National Theatre is putting together and moving towards our stages. And then as part of that, I spend 1 day a week as the dramaturg in the Immersive Storytelling Studio, which is the the work of which you're, I suppose, finding out a little bit more about today. So I'll hand over to Steve to tell you a little bit about the most recent project out of the gate at the Immersive Storytelling Studio, which is All Kinds of Limbo.
Cool. Thanks. Can you hear me okay? I'll project my voice a bit more. So I'm Steve Jelley. Apologies for the bewildering CV. I run a production company that makes immersive theatre and immersive drama, immersive anything really. And we also opened a studio in Earlsfield about 2.5 years ago called Dimension in partnership with Digital Catapult, which records volumetric performance. So that's hundreds of cameras in a sort of birdcage configuration. And it allows us to capture and process 3D video. And it's an amazing technology that we've licensed from Microsoft, and it captures realistic human performance in 3 dimensions, which means that you can then display that in virtual reality. So it feels like you're meeting an actor and you're able to see all of the subtleties of their performance because it's optically captured, it's photographically captured. We also do lots of, again, optical capture of sets and things like that. So, you know, we had a big show called Britannia, which we did with Sky, which was in the Venice Film Festival last year. And for that, it's a drama that's on Sky, all about Romans and Druids, starring Mackenzie Crook and Neil Morrissey. It's great fun if you haven't seen it. And we created, in virtual reality, you could enter the world of the show and you could actually participate. And if you drank the wine, then you'd go into the Roman land, and if you ate the mushrooms, then you'd go into the Druid world. You know, we had some remarkable reactions that we were not expecting to that work. So somebody broke down and cried because they'd visited the Welsh beach that we'd scanned for the beach set, you know, and it triggered a childhood memory of going there as a young child, you know, and I think that's what's really interesting about this medium. We don't really know what to call these things, you know. We generally seem to call them experiences because they are more vivid, you know, almost. You know, we feel like we've been present. We feel like we've had an experience. You know, when there's so Draw Me Close was a classic example. A lot of people will remember that as if that's happened to them. And the only analogy I would make to that is that's equivalent to going to see an amazing piece of theatre at one of these theatres. You know, so in all this world of tech, you know, the most technical medium of all, which is immersive theatre and virtual reality and XR, is actually closest to the oldest medium of them all, which is theatre. So I won't explain what we'll do, but we'll play a short clip talking about All Kinds of Limbo, which is the show that we did with Toby recently and took to Sundance Film Festival a month ago. And it's a music performance, again, a tie-in experience with Rufus Norris's show, Small Island.
The National Theatre have collaborated with Accenture to develop a communal room-scale VR experience where the audience and performers are in the same space together.
So I found the production of All Kinds of Limbo to be quite exciting. It's a unique and innovative experience. It's literally the first of its kind.
Small Island is an incredible story. It also offered us a terrific opportunity to expand outside of the theatre itself, and in a way how we could grow out of the historical context that the play is set in. How do we reflect British Caribbean culture now?
I came to Accenture and said I would like to have performance with life-size holograms. And we then went through a journey with Accenture looking at the different types of technology that would be available to us to do that. We realised at this point in time the best experience is volumetrically captured VR.
It was important for us to recognize that the National Theatre is one of the world's greatest creativity-driven institutions. And as such, as its partner for innovation, we were able to bring some of our creative technologists from our virtual reality team to help come and shape some of the vision alongside the leadership of the National Theatre, and then help provide some of the technical expertise that provided the 3D and technical scaling that underpinned what people are experiencing with all kinds of limbo.
We are doing what is known as a volumetric capture. The performer will be recorded by many cameras, the output of which will be a 3D video. We will take the mesh and texture into our environment which we have built with all the other elements that comprise the virtual reality experience.
We've been really having to merge together the technical side as well as the creative aspect, which is generally performance, and making sure that the performance is as realistic and as creative as it can be.
We have got audiences in the space moving around, so what we really have to work hard to do is to create an environment for them where they feel safe. So Accenture developed a tracking system in which we can recognise our communal audience, and that informs how we move around in the space.
There's cutting-edge technologies that have been used to make the experience relevant for many other types of uses, whether that's training simulation, multi-user experiences, even entertainment or games.
It's also a significant stepping stone in terms of what we see ourselves doing in 3 years, 5 years' time, both with the technology, with the performance, how we engage audiences with this type of thing. It's a really exciting project for us.
I'm absolutely delighted that we've managed to work with Accenture on creating this piece of Immersive VR, which looks at the creative infusion that period of history has resulted in. From Calypso through to Grime, I'm thrilled with the result.
But I wanted to show you that one actually for a really good reason, which is that the dominant narrative of everything we do in immersive is shaped by tech, you know, and as a practitioner myself, and you know, certainly at Toby in the National Theatre, you know, that's fine. You know, it's fine that, you know, tech is the people who are pushing this. You know, we have partnerships with Microsoft, with Nikon, with all these people, you know, and very often they're very helpful with funding. But it's very important to say that the practice of creating this stuff has got nothing to do with tech. You know, there are tools, there are crafts, there are, you know, there's a great deal of course, highly technical work going on. Certainly in our company, we have computer vision engineers, we have, you know, real-time pipeline programmers, we have special effects artists, etc., etc. But to an extent, you know, the media has always had, you know, craftspeople like this. You know, and I really don't see the difference. As my bewildering CV says, I was a film producer first, then I was a games producer, then I was a technology person at Apple, then I was an online video person, then I was an augmented reality person, and they're all different ways of experiencing the media. So I would say, and I think Toby would agree with this, that everything that the work that's happening in the Immersive Storytelling Studio is really about trying to engage much more widely with dramatists, writers, directors, you know, who have the stories to tell. And then my function, and I'm a producer, so this actually is my function, is to enable that to find its way onto the stage, or into a virtual reality headset, or into a location-based experience near you. We've done a lot of these now. I'm developing a new one, location-based theatres, location-based museums, digital museums, and it's a mature medium, you know, and we can make great stuff with it now. Anyway, over to you, Arnold.
Thank you. Question, some of it which came up this morning, but keeps recurring to me as I see things like this, is basically, how does the necessity for certain kinds of equipment for the spectator to be wearing fit in with creating something that, at least traditional theater, is a communal experience? So if somebody has to wear, the head-mounted display, that's obviously going to be limited to a certain number of people, each having a kind of a personal or interior experience. And yet you're talking about storytelling, which is the oldest thing in the world, usually to large groups of people. So how do the demands of the technology and the traditions of communal theater fit together, or do they?
Yeah, it's a key question, and the answer there are sort of several answers to that, I guess. So All Kinds of Limbo was right from the start very clearly a communal, not social experience. So what we were aiming for was a way of experiencing Nubia's performance and the music in a communal environment where you could see everybody else. So everybody who's wearing those headsets together, they can see each other as points of light, you know, around. So you become aware of everybody's presence. But her performance is what's centre stage, and the environments around change as the music changes. And that was remarkably successful and was expanded out in a new version, actually, for Sundance, so we can do 20 people at a time. And what's remarkable is people started dancing with each other, even while wearing a headset, and we managed to break down that barrier to, I've got this thing on my head, into, oh yeah, I'm fully invested, I've suspended my disbelief, I'm part of this now. So that really worked.
So in that sense, the spectators are becoming physically engaged in a way that, you know, when we sit in an audience, we tend to we're isolated even though we're all together. So is that part of the idea that it should work that way?
Yeah, and I think something like All Kinds of Limbo is very equivalent to, I don't know, some of the early Punch Drunk shows, you know, that I also was involved, you know, took a lot of inspiration from, you know, so where you don't exactly have a role, but you're there, you know, you're in amongst the performance. Now there's another layer beyond that, which this technology can let you do, which is to actually interact with the drama, to have a role yourself. But that starts taking it into sort of, when people were mentioning in the last session, sort of games, it's more agency. So it's sort of gamey territory, certainly, where you've got to think of it very, very differently. And then to your first point about how do I communally experience something on stage, again, that is theoretically possible at the moment. And we can all wear a HoloLens or a Magic Leap device, and we can synchronize them, and we can see what's on stage. Just at the moment, those experiences are staggeringly expensive.
And I suppose the thing is, we talk about theatre being a kind of communal medium and a moment where we all come together, but actually the communal nature of it is always on a spectrum. There is some theatre which is deeply communal, in which the audience is present and alive in the room. There's a lot of theatre where really it's not vastly different from watching it. If you've got Pross Arch and you have to keep your mouth shut, then really it's not that much different from watching a film or sitting with a VR helmet. So I think it's an important question. It's important that we keep digging into it. But I think the idea that there's something uniquely alienating about wearing a VR headset as opposed to sitting in a dark room and watching forward is, I think, can be a bit unhelpful sometimes.
Yeah, and I also think it's absolutely not true. So even within the confines of communal, not social, right? So we're all experiencing something together, and we can all see each other's position. The other show that we did for Sundance is called Atomu, and it's a show about, it's an amazing story actually, about you know, directed by Sharifa Ali and Yetunde. And they found a Kenyan myth about gender fluidity from 1,000 years ago, which is that if you went into the jungle and you danced around this tree 7 times, you would end up with the body that you wanted. Which is absolutely. It's in Kenya. There are several. I mean, there are lots of them. And of course, Kenya has, you know, 18 laws, you know, against homosexuality of one kind or another, highly repressive. So they found this myth, and we created an immersive dance piece. Now, what was remarkable again, it's a communal, not social experience. You know, you are the ancestors actually that are encouraging, you know, our protagonists to come in and dance around this tree, and it's a really beautiful piece. But what we realized is that because you can see everybody and you can see everybody's actions through hands tracking, that actually the audience becomes part of the dance, and we can augment them. I mean, I'm the world's worst dancer, but in the hands of some artificial intelligence, I can converge my movements into that of a good dancer. And that's what everybody else sees. So it's like we're just starting to look at the grammar of this stuff, and it becomes, I mean, this is just all new, really. So I think it's quite exciting, even within those limitations.
You can do a lot. I have to admit that whenever I see the pictures of people wearing the HoloLens or one of those things, I think back to my youth when we went to the movies and put on the little red and green glasses to see the primitive 3D. And of course, you see all of those pictures of audiences with wearing their little glasses. So it seems like certain technologies obviously get more and more sophisticated, but in one sense, there is nothing new. Just so before this, we had a brief conversation, and you were talking about the way that these technologies sort of get absorbed, so that we don't even notice them anymore. And I wonder if you can talk about that in relation to current technology. So yes, we're very aware of either ourselves wearing this equipment or other people wearing it. Do you see that becoming just part of the normal experience of some kind of performance or entertainment?
Yeah, I think it's quite, to sort of help answer that question, it's worth saying how within our practice, what we do, we've become very reliant on theatrical skills, actually. So ultimately, when we make content, whether I'm holding up a camera like this and I'm looking inside I'm looking at the 3D space that has the content in it, or whether I'm putting it on my head and I'm going into it, or I'm representing it in the real world, it's all three-dimensional content. So it has to be, it's built with a concept of space, it's built with position, everything we do is 3D. And of course, who understands that? Well, people who work with theatre. So we need set designers, we need directors, we need actors who understand their position. We don't just need a bunch of eye actors, acting for a frame that's sort of here. We need people who can use their whole body for performance. So that's very, and a lot of people working in immersive theatre realised that a long time ago, about 2015, 2016, or thereabouts. And then we started working like that. So what's now happening, of course, is because that approach to creating digital content in 3D has been also discovered by theatre, you're now seeing things like projection mapping is now just entirely normal in any major stage show. But that's exactly the same principle. And I'm playing with LED panels and virtual production at the moment. So robotic cameras moving around sets which are lit, and they look real, but they light the subjects and everything else. And I don't think it's going to be very long before we start seeing those on stage. And then of course the whole audience can see sort of collective illusion, and the back of this stage can become anything. It's kind of where I see it going.
And we've already at the National recently, and this is not something I suppose that usually gets lumped in with the kind of VR and the XR stuff, is we've started introducing these closed captioning glasses, which we're sort of rolling out, which allow audience members to receive captioning on an individual basis rather than having a big screen that you have to hire and everyone has to look at. You can just have the script in whatever language you want fed straight into your glasses. Now that's something which technology we helped to kind of put together, but it's something that we hope will be rolled out worldwide eventually as a way of experiencing shows and of improving access to shows for the hard of hearing and deaf audiences. But also the thing that I'm getting excited about, in addition to the access question for that, is what that means in terms of being able to deliver asymmetrical experiences to communal audiences. And when we start looking at things like bone conduction headphones, or even just the binaural technology that already is reasonably widespread, that we used in Anna and the Dorfman, and which had been used in shows like The Encounter elsewhere, I get really excited about what we can do to augment individual audiences' experience. That doesn't mean that they have to be completely closed off, but that will allow us to deliver completely different communal experiences. And I think we're going to see, as the technology gets cheaper, we're going to see more and more of it, because it's just an exciting tool for artists to play with, I think.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the concept of storytelling, because you said, you're working with 360-degree storytelling and so on. Storytelling is at the root of theater and so many communal experiences. So what is it that you are taking from storytelling, and what are you adding on to it, or how is it working in this world?
I suppose the way that it's working most kind of viscerally for me is that a lot of what we do in the Immersive Storytelling Studio is to bring theatre artists in who have never worked in VR and any kind of, often never worked in film or VR or any kind of digital medium, and show them some of the things that we've made, some of the things that have been created so far, and ask them to imagine how they might use these tools or how they might use these things to find new approaches to storytelling. And a frequent experience we have is that we'll bring in artists who are very resistant, who are, there's a lot of resistance to technology in theatre in lots of ways. It is a storytelling medium, and a lot of artists will kind of privilege the live experience, the one-on-one experience, or the communal experience above anything that technology could get in the way of. And you bring them in and they go, well, there's nothing I want to do with VR. It's not my kind of thing, really. I like to, the live moment is everything to me. And then they see it and what it can do, and then so often they'll go away and go, actually, there's something, I think I have found something that I can do there. I've found a way of telling this story in a way that I didn't think possible before. And to use the sort of Jordan Tannehill example from Draw Me Close, it was a way for him to allow his imagination to be kind of set free and to allow the story. For those who didn't see it, it's the story of a man thinking back to the last days of his mother's life, who died of cancer, and you kind of revisit the house and have an almost kind of haunting moment with this character's mother. The technology was unlocking the ability to tell that story, and to tell a story of time shifts, to tell a story of place shifts, to tell a story of an actor aging in front of you in a way which wasn't really possible without it. So I guess the storytelling for me is it's always about bringing the artists in, bringing the storytellers in, and demonstrating to them a few of the things which have been made possible so far, and then getting them to see how they can take that baton up and go further. Toby, in his kind of meetings with artists, I don't think I've ever seen him start with the technology. In fact, we hardly ever talk about the technology. I think artists often come to the studio going, give me the HoloLens, give me, I can't wait to get stuck in with the mocap suit. Yeah, exactly. Show me the toys. And I feel like that as well. But it's the really exciting thing, and the thing that I've learned from Toby is that they are not the first thing you talk about. We'll often just go, look, let's not even think about how we're going to do it. Just tell me what you want to do. And almost a bit like if you've ever worked with stage magicians, they never want you to start talking about the trick. They want you to tell them what you want to happen. I want that chair to levitate, and then they'll work it out. So I want people to come in and go, I want the story to work like this, and I don't know how it can be done. And then that's when the creative technologists can come in and start making that a reality.
And then just a couple of another point about storytelling, which is kind of the essential thing, is we're inventing the grammar at the moment. Mm-hmm. It's like, and that's kind of why I've restlessly pursued lots of different media myself, personally, is because, certainly film can be very formulaic. And there's literally no formula for this. So I'll give you an example. I'm doing a project at the moment with a Hollywood director who's a real historian of film. He's great. And we're doing an ensemble piece where all of the performances are volumetrically captured. So we're able to, in a sort of format like we just showed you, to essentially be on stage as part of a performance, as a group of people. So the audience will experience this by literally wandering around, listening to whatever conversation takes their fancy. And we've constructed it that way because he's realised that essentially proximity is equivalent to the cut. So we can actually, how close you are to a character determines your level of emotional involvement and engagement with their story. And if they're talking over there, you don't care. So everyone's going to have a different experience of this ensemble. And the story is a very clever script written by Stephen Lally that is, multifaceted. And that's how it's going to work. Now, I have no idea whether it's going to be successful or not, but it's a really fascinating concept for how theatre might work. And of course, you can only do that in immersive theatre because we can't, be amongst the actors in that way.
Jane, do we have time for questions?
I think maybe just, a couple of very quick ones, and we can have a shorter tea break. Is that a possibility? Yeah.
Okay, so we'll take two questions, yes.
I just want to drop you in slightly abstractedly. Can you make any observations on the impact on the actors? With these difference of approach in how they're dealing with the directors and their awareness?
They love it. I mean, I have to say. It's an actor's medium. This. They get to see the set while they're acting. We previs everything. So
taking direction, their awareness of where to project and
because the way we film our actors is just really passive. There's because we're recording everything and there's no crew.
In live theatre though as well, where there might be effects and.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's always on a case-by-case basis, but I feel like particularly actors who've been working in film extensively, particularly these days, you're often acting to a green screen or to a ping-pong ball on a stick anyway. But I think certainly what we found with something like Draw Me Close was that despite it being a very, the actor who was playing the mother in it was in a mocap suit covered in, white dots and with a helmet and sort of a puck on her hand and everything like that. But she was still delivering deeply emotive performances and it was an unusual acting gig, I think, in lots and lots of ways, but one that all of the performers who's played that role so far seem to have really thrived on. It's immersive theatre's hard on actors because it's requesting them to often do the same thing over and over again and provide a very highly emotional moment for a lot of different people. So there's no doubt that there are strains compared to performing one show once per evening. But I think, to be honest, most of the actors, in fact, all the actors I've worked with so far, have really thrived on the new possibilities.
One more question. Yes.
Can I ask you about the process of making and the workflow? And this relates to something that Dick was saying earlier about the sort of differences in a theatre production process and bringing a video media material in which has a different workflow and a different timeline. And it seems to me that in making VR stuff, the place of work really is the monitor. And you don't kind of you don't get in a studio and do a whole bunch of stuff live until you've scoped the virtual space, in which case you're not going to all meet in a studio and roam around for a bit. You're going to meet at a monitor. Is that how it works? It's
how it used to be, but it's not how it is now. So actually, it's the opposite now. It's more like you're able to. Let's say you want to workshop something. Classic, which is how I would start with any group of actors. In a workshop, let's act it out. Everything starts with a read-through and a block out. What we can now do is we can bring in, the block out of the scene and the set design and everything into that process. So it used to be monitor-driven, but it's now turned into, we bring all these tools into one place and essentially extend the workshop into the sort of continuous process of making it, which is great. It's just a much better way to do it. But it used to be look at everything, but it doesn't work like that now.
It feels like it's mainly still lots of people in a room is mainly what we have. Whatever we're doing is, it might be a different group of people and they might be in a room in slightly different periods and different time frames. But just to give one very quick example, because I know we're running out of time, we're currently assisting on a project which involves a certain amount of animation in it, or at least one idea for the project to have a certain amount of animation. Now, 5 years ago, the process for that would be that the animator would come in and sit at their laptop and do 10 different versions of the animated scene until it was right and take direction in that way. Actually, what we're looking at doing this time is to put actors in mocap suits, use them as the wireframes to put the animation onto, and then actually have the animation acted out. So it's actually going to transform what was one person at a laptop doing their digital animation into a live, rehearsed performance that will then be filmed in a sort of clever way. So there are unexpected opportunities for things to actually get more live and more organic, I think, as well as.
Okay, I think we have to take a tea break. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Arnold.